Hi there. I will tell you that I am grateful to you for listening to my stories. They are of great value to me, and I love to tell. Now brought me to tell you how my interest in stories started. Here is why I became so deeply passionate about collecting tales of mysterious events and the strange, unexplainable experiences that shape people's lives. It all began many years ago, when I worked as a teacher in a small, breathtakingly beautiful village nestled high in the mountainous regions of the Caucasus. It wasn't just any village. It was a place steeped in history, its very essence tied to the past. The village was ancient, almost frozen in time. Its homes, crafted with a mastery now long forgotten, clung to the rugged slopes like guardians of secrets. Some were perched high, commanding views of the valleys below, while others nestled low, almost hidden by the dense greenery. Each house seemed like a living testament to the hands that built it, and I couldn't shake the feeling that not a single one was younger than a century. Their wooden beams bore the marks of age. Their stones whispered of stories long since past. The villagers, a mix of generations, carried an air of quiet wisdom. They were reserved yet unfailingly polite, as though they too bore the weight of the village's long history. They respected the past and treated it as a living presence, woven into their daily lives. My own house stood on a steep wooded incline, and from my porch I could see the entire village sprawled out below, with the mountains towering above us like eternal sentinels. The houses were built so closely together that the presence of neighbors was almost palpable, even in silence. But one house stood out, a small, low-built structure right next to mine. It was home to an old man named Alfred. He was a solitary figure, a loner who kept mostly to himself. His wife had died tragically many years before, while tending sheep on the treacherous slopes of the mountains. The loss had left a deep void in him, and though the years had passed, his mourning remained as raw as the jagged cliffs that surrounded us. Despite his solitude, Alfred was warm and welcoming in his own quiet way. Over time, I found myself drawn to him. Often we would sit together on a weathered wooden bench outside his house, its surface smoothed by decades of snow and sun. Those hours spent with Alfred, drinking steaming cups of fragrant herbal tea, became some of the most profound of my life. He spoke in a way that seemed to transcend the mundane, as though his words carried the weight of both his own experiences and something greater, something beyond. Many of the stories I now share on this channel came directly from Alfred. They are, in a way, a retelling of his wisdom, passed down through me. Alfred wasn't just an old man with tales to tell. He was a sage, a man shaped by the trials of life, and gifted with an extraordinary understanding of the invisible threads that connect us all. He had a remarkable insight into the human spirit, our strengths, our frailties, and the unseen forces that guide and challenge us. What made Alfred's stories so compelling was their source. Not long after his wife's tragic death, he began to experience something extraordinary. One cold evening, with the first snow of winter clinging to the mountains, Alfred told me what had happened. He spoke softly, his voice imbued with a mixture of reverence and calm certainty. "She came back," he said simply, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Not in a dream, and not in my imagination. She came back, and she has never left." At first I didn't know what to say, but Alfred didn't seem to need my words. He explained that his wife's spirit had returned to him, not as a fleeting vision, but as a constant presence. He could feel her beside him, guiding him, comforting him, even laughing softly at his stubbornness when he refused to wear a jacket on cold nights. It wasn't a haunting, he insisted. It was love, a bond that transcended death itself. Through her presence, Alfred said, he had gained an understanding of the spirit world that few people ever achieve. It was not a world to be feared, but one to be respected, for it was as real as the earth beneath our feet. He explained that this invisible realm is always around us, intertwined with our own, and that those who ignore or disrespect it do so at great peril. One evening, under a waning moon, Alfred decided to share with me some of the most profound lessons he had learned. The fire crackled softly in the hearth as he spoke, and his voice carried the gravity of someone who had lived these truths. "You must tread carefully in this world," he began. "There are places you should not go, words you should not speak, and forces you must never mock. These are not superstitions, my friend. They are laws, as real and unyielding as the mountains." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "Do not walk through sacred places with a careless heart," he warned. "Kirkjugadar, old ruins, shadowed forests, these places are not abandoned. They belong to those who came before us. If you disrespect their sanctity, you invite their wrath." He told me of a young shepherd who had once wandered into an ancient burial ground to take a shortcut home. The boy returned pale and trembling, his hair streaked with white, though he was barely 20. From that day forward, he was never the same. He spoke of hearing whispers in the wind and seeing shadowy figures in the corners of his vision. Eventually, he withdrew entirely from the village, retreating into a silence that no one could break. Alfred paused, letting the weight of the story settle before continuing. "There are words that bind us to this world, and there are words that call to the next. Be careful what you say, and to whom. Never mock the dead, for they hear more than we realize." He shared the story of a man from a neighboring village who had laughed at the idea of spirits during a gathering. "If they're real," the man had joked, "let them show themselves." That night, the man's house was filled with unexplainable noises, footsteps, whispers, and the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor. He moved away soon after, but wherever he went, the disturbances followed. Alfred believed the man had unwittingly invited a restless spirit to attach itself to him, a consequence of his arrogance. Finally, Alfred spoke of the soul itself. "Your soul is your most precious possession," he said. "Guard it well. If you venture too far into the unknown, if you disrespect the invisible forces around you, you risk losing a piece of yourself. Some never recover." He told me about a woman who had dabbled in seances out of curiosity. She had hoped to contact a loved one, but instead opened a door to something darker. Afterward, she complained of feeling constantly drained, as though something was feeding off her energy. Her once bright spirit dimmed, and she fell into despair. As Alfred's words filled the night air, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He spoke not to frighten me, but to impart wisdom, hard-earned lessons from a life that had been shaped by both love and loss, light and shadow. Before I left that village, Alfred gave me one last piece of advice. "Keep your heart open," he said, "but tread carefully. Respect the unseen world, and it will respect you in return." His words stayed with me, and they are the reason I now collect and share these stories. They are not just tales. They are warnings, glimpses into the mysteries that surround us. So as you listen, keep your mind open, your heart humble, and your soul guarded. For there is much to learn, but even more to respect.